morning, Atlantis. That song was for Danny.
Good morning, Houston, and I want to thank my wife, Marie, and my kids, Isabella, James, Anthony, Joseph, and Gabrielle for that wonderful song.
And Houston ISS, deploy command sent.
And we see that.
The crew on board the Space Shuttle and Space Station Complex continuing the deployment of the 1A channel solar array wing. This is the forward panel, set of panels on the new S4 truss element. This procedure involves deploying the solar array wing about halfway out to the to about 49%, and allowing the array to pause and be warmed by the sunlight, ensuring that the coating on the panels does not stick as the solar array is commanded to deploy fully. The pause will last about 30 to 40 minutes before continuing on with the deployment.
And abort command sent at 15:53, Houston.
We copy, thank you. ISS Houston, that looks like a good nominal deploy to 49%.
And we concur, Steve. Looks good.
ISS Houston on the big loop for the deploy. We're ready to pick up in 17.7, and we're ready for you to deploy to 100%.
And that's in work. We're starting 17.7 now. Steve, thanks. And Houston ISS, deploy command sent at 16:23:30.
16:23:30, thank you.
This array had been resting in the sunlight for about 30 minutes, now continuing on with the deployment to 100%.
And Houston ISS, we see 100% deployed on 1A.
We copy that, and thank you, JR.
The first solar array wing for the new S4 truss element fully deployed at 11:29 a.m. Central Time this morning.
ISS Houston on the big loop for SAW deploy.
Go ahead, Megan.
JR, you have a go now for step 15.7 in the procedure, deploying 49%.
And that's in work. And Houston ISS, the deploy command was sent, 17:16:15.
Copy, JR.
The next solar array wing is now being deployed to about halfway out, the 15.5 bay mark, about 49% deployed, where then it will be paused to be warmed up by the sunlight to ensure that the coating on the panels does not cause the solar array blanket panels to stick during the full deployment. You see the panels separating slowly as the mast is commanded to extend out of the canister. This is the 3A solar array wing and channel for the new S4 truss element. This is extending aft of the truss structure.
Atlantis, Houston on the big loop. Please go free drift on the DAP for SAW deploy.
Houston, Atlantis, going free drift this time.
Thanks, Brew. And ISS Houston on the big loop. We are ready for 17.7 of SAW deploy.
Okay, Megan, that's in work. And Houston ISS, deploy command sent, 175230.
Copy, JR. Thanks.
Deployment of the solar array wing continuing from about halfway extended to the fully deployed position, as commanded by the crew on board the Space Shuttle Space Station complex.
And Houston ISS, we see a good deploy on 3A.
Copy, JR. Good work. We'll stand by for the final verification.
In work.
Both of the new solar array wings from the S4 truss element are fully extended now. Each of the wings weighs more than 2,400 pounds and uses 32,800 solar array cells per wing. Each wing is capable of generating nearly 32 kilowatts of direct current power by collecting the sunlight and tracking the sun while the space station orbits the Earth. There are two of these wings on the S4 module, the new truss installed in the station.
ISS, we can confirm 17.8 is complete.
JR, we copy 17.8 is complete. We can confirm solar array fully deployed. Good deploy.
With these two array wings in place, the module capable of providing about 60 kilowatts of power. This is Mission Control Houston with a view from a camera on the Space Shuttle robotic arm looking back towards the payload bay and its attached point to the International Space Station. The robotic arm being positioned to view the retraction of the solar array atop the station on the P6 truss.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're continuing to watch live television pictures being downlinked from the robotic arm of the Space Shuttle as it is maneuvered into what is known as the SAW viewing position. That's a viewing position that will allow folks inside the shuttle to take a good look at the P6 solar array as it is being retracted on the second EVA of the mission planned for tomorrow. These views coming to us as the shuttle station complex orbits 209 miles above the South Pacific on a northeasterly track. This is International Space Station downlink video as we are in the midst of a maneuver using the robotic arm of the International Space Station to move into the proper position so that it'll be ready for translation of the mobile transporter cart along the truss structure railway. Space Shuttle robotic arm already has been maneuvered into position for the solar array retraction viewing that'll be planned in association with tomorrow's spacewalk by Steve Swanson and Pat Forrester.
Well, good evening, everyone. This is Bill Harwood at the Johnson Space Center. I'd like to start with you, Commander Sturko, if I could. This has been an exciting day, at least for us on the ground watching it, with 2 solar array panel deploys, I guess some computer glitches, you've had some attitude control stuff, and now you've got it all straightened out. Everything looks pretty good. What's your sense of the mission so far?
Well, we couldn't be happier with the mission so far. It's going really great. JR and Danny had a great EVA yesterday. We had very successful robotics, and as you say, the solar array deploys that put a good chunk of our mission behind us.
Well, let me ask Sonny Williams a question real quick there. You know, this is obviously an exciting time for you. You've set a new endurance record this week, or you will, and I'm sure you can't wait to get home, but I'm also guessing you're going to miss the station a little bit. What are your thoughts about it? I mean, I would guess it's a little bit bittersweet, isn't it?
Well, Bill, you're absolutely right. This has been my home. I love living up here. I'm ready to turn over to Clay. I'm ready to go home and see my family and my dog, of course. You know that. And but I'm really going to miss it. It's a wonderful place to live, a wonderful place to work. Hopefully, over the past 6 months, a lot of people have joined me and been able to see that.
Sonny, you're not worried about the Yankees closing the gap, are you? It's 9 games now.
Hey, it's 9 games. I'm not worried yet, and we're going to have a good series coming up. I'm not worried at all.
Well, let me ask Clay Anderson a question. I know you've only been there for a couple of days, but what's your impression of your home in space? What's caught your eye so far?
I think it's a pretty incredible place to be. Just looking out the window at the station when the sun shines off the arrays and seeing all the vistas that we can see, it's just been incredible for me.
What sort of advice has Sonny given you?
Keep my hair short, and and I think she's trying to hide everything from me, but we're having a good time doing some handovers. She's trying to teach me all the tricks of the trade and where all the cubby holes are on the station, so it's been a lot of fun.
Let me ask Jim Riley a question. You know, Jim, there's been a fair amount of discussion down here, obviously, about the left Omspod blanket. John Shannon told us today he's going to wait till tomorrow to decide which technique to use and when to do it. What are your thoughts going into that in terms of difficulty and y'all's ability to, you know, to improvise a little bit?
Well, Bill, luckily for us, we've got 4 really good, at least 3 good, really good spacewalkers, and then I'm here to help out wherever I can. But we've got 4 guys that any one of us could do it, and whatever they give us, we'll be happy to do it.
Do any of you guys have any concerns at all about the health of your thermal protection system? I mean, this looks like it's pretty minor, but then again, you know, you are doing something EVA, so that makes it unusual.
Bill, the words we've heard is that this is just the right thing to do, the conservative thing to do, and we really appreciate everybody taking a hard look at it to make sure we've got it in the best possible condition for entry.
One more for you, Jim, if I could, before we go to Danny. Just, you know, looking at it in terms of EVA 3 or EVA 4, I mean, it would seem to me anyway, on the outside looking in, it'd make more sense to leave EVA 3 the way it is, since you've got some uncertainties with the P6 solar array retract and all of that. Do you guys have any preference for when you might do it?
Well, we're actually talking with the ground a lot about that, about the different options, and we're going to have a big tag up here in another couple of days, or tomorrow or the next day, about what exactly we want to do and how to do it. And it depends an awful lot on the procedures that they're developing for us there on the ground and how complicated they might be on how we're going to handle the timing. So we're kind of in wait mode right now to see what they've got to deliver to us, and then we'll have a discussion about how we want to do it and what we think is the best way to go.
Let me ask Danny a question, if I could. Pat Forrester and Steve Swanson, of course, they're going out tomorrow, and one of the things everybody's looking forward to is that P6-2B retraction. I know your crystal ball is no better than anybody else's, but what's your prediction going into it?
Well, you know, luckily we've had the opportunity to see this done before, and so there's been a lot of information that's been exchanged between the previous crew and ourselves, and we've had an opportunity to learn a lot since then, had an opportunity to really understand the hardware, and I think we're definitely ready for what we know is going to be coming up. There might also be some things out there that we don't know about, but we'll do our best to deal with it on the fly.
When you're looking at that retraction scenario, I mean, I guess you guys have, what, 45 minutes at the front end of your EVA if there's any problems where you could go up and maybe do a little something. Could you give me some sense of what you guys are prepared for?
Well, I think the way that the ground and ourselves are looking at it, it's going to be a real-time call. It's going to be depending on how things are flowing. And if things look good, I think we're going to try and get as much as we can in the allotted time. So teams are well prepared for that, but we're also prepared that if we run into something, that we can have a good stopping point and kind of regroup and come up with a different game plan if we need to.
Thanks. And let me ask Sonny another question, if I could. Just looking ahead, this flight's really the first step in a pretty tight sequence of missions that are building out the electrical system so you can bring up, I guess, the European and the Japanese research modules later this year. How do you see Station right now in its evolution? I mean, where it stands, the health of all of its systems, and how this is operating? What's your sense of all of this going into this very busy period?
So over the last 6 months, we've seen some big changes, you know, thermally and electrically with the adding of the 12A and now 13A's solar array. So the station's been in great shape through that whole thing. Of course, it's had a couple little hiccups here and there, but the ground teams have been just spectacular, figuring out any types of problems and making us feel at home up here. I think we're ready to add our international partners, not only as modules but crew members. We're looking forward to it.
Listen, I want to go ahead and ask Danny my first question. Danny, hi from all of El Paso. Listen, you're our first astronaut, as you know. Everybody in El Paso basically stopped what they were doing at 5:30 on Friday, and we're watching you. You and I have had a chance to talk several times now. How was it? Describe for us what it was like to launch.
The launch is absolutely incredible. The words don't do it justice. There's just a tremendous feeling of the vehicle as you're making your ascent, and once you get into orbit, the feeling is just phenomenal. And we've been feeling this way since we got here, so words is hard to describe.
Well, I know you're having a hard time telling us about the launch, but we were all glued to our television sets anywhere that you were in El Paso watching this spacewalk. I know that we've had a chance to get video of you when you're underwater doing those spacewalks, kind of going through the motions. Now you've had a chance to do the real thing. How similar was the practice to the real thing?
Well, surprisingly, I found myself, kind of putting myself in the same situation that I was during training. And so while I was out on S3 and S4, the starboard segments of the truss that we just put up, I just tried to envision myself being in neutral buoyancy laboratory and kind of doing it just the way we had trained.
This next question is for CJ. You know, we had a chance to speak at Johnson Space Center in the spring, and there was a lot of talk during those press conferences about the kind of problems that the solar arrays may have as far as unfolding. We've now had a chance to see those unfold. Any of those problems come up during this particular mission?
No, ma'am. As you saw today, the solar arrays with the new techniques that were developed after the 4A mission, those techniques and procedures worked just superbly, and everything went very smoothly. So, like we talked about a few months ago, that was a major part of our concern. As you know, we still got the 2B retract in front of us, but we're hoping it goes as well.
CJ, how did Danny do? Everybody wants to know. I know all of you guys are out there, and I'll be getting a question to every one of you if I can, but, the big question here, how is our El Pasoan doing in space?
Danny's doing just great. We're so proud of Danny. You know, we do a lot of our training out there at El Paso at the airport. You've probably seen our NASA Shuttle training aircraft out there. So we know Danny's family very well. We've eaten at his parents' house and had delicious food there, and just wonderful hospitality from all the great folks in El Paso.
Question is for Sonny. I understand that you were able to run the Boston Marathon in absentia. Just exactly how did you do that, and how did you place?
Hey Liz, that's another great question. We have a treadmill up here that you get held down to the treadmill by wearing a harness, and then you have bungees and a number of clips on either side to simulate your weight, and that holds you down onto the treadmill, and then you can run. I was really hoping the treadmill would have broken during the time. Unfortunately, it's a good piece of gear, and it kept going, and I suffered through 26.2 just like everybody else out there in freezing cold weather in Boston. Any marathon's tough, but I finished in a little over 4 hours, and so I was pretty happy with that. I'm not quite sure what my place was, but it was somewhere right near my sister's. Thanks for asking.
I know that you are going to be heading back home here when everybody is coming back in a couple of days. Tell me what it is the first thing that you want to do when you get back home.
I think the first thing I really want to do is go to the beach and see the ocean and put my feet in some water, some real water, and then, of course, take a shower.
Clay, this next question is for you. You just had a chance to get out there. How's it going so far? Is it any different than what you imagined?
I think that I've adapted reasonably well. I was kind of surprised at how easily it came to me when I got into orbit, but I have no reference to compare it to. I've done the what used to be the KC-135 a few times, but that period of weightlessness isn't long enough to really give you a taste like it is here. But I think it's going well so far.
I guess you haven't been up there long enough to get homesick. What do you think you're going to miss while you're out in space?
What I'll miss for me is an easy one. I'll miss my family and my kids. That's a pretty important part of my life, but they're doing really well, and we had a great group down in Florida to watch the launch, and they're very excited about this opportunity for me and for our family, so I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
You told me on a previous interview that you wanted to look down at the Earth and look back out into space. I guess you got a chance to do that, and what was that like?
I was actually near the end of the EVA. You know, things had been going really well, and we were a little bit ahead of schedule, and I was on my way back to the airlock, and you know, I told my father that I was going to do that, and I turned my helmet lights off. It was during a night pass. I looked down below me, and I thought I saw the continent, or saw India, with just by the lights outlining the perimeter of the land. And then I turned myself out and looked out into space, and unfortunately I didn't see a whole lot of stars because my eyes weren't well adjusted to the darkness yet, but I did see several, and I just thought that was pretty cool. Plus we had a beautiful crescent moon that night.
And Jim Riley, you were on this first spacewalk with Danny, and how was this spacewalk different from the ones you've done in the past?
Well, the first thing was we got a chance to reuse the airlock, which was the thing we attached to the station on my last mission, so it was kind of neat to see that. Going out with Danny was probably the most challenging spacewalk certainly that I've ever had, and it was up there on the level of difficulty for just about anybody. And the great thing about Danny was he got out there and he was like a veteran spacewalker from the very moment he got outside, so he did a superb job, and we're really proud of the work that he did yesterday.
Commander Sturckow, does the thermal blanket problem concern you particularly?
Well, when we first saw it, I don't think we were too concerned, but we've heard, and we're still not, it looks like it's just the right thing to do to go out and tack that down. And we've already had discussion with our lead flight director, Kelly Beck, and my boss, Steve Lindsay, just to talk about what the options are. And I think they've gotten our crew inputs, and combined with all the smart folks on the ground, they'll come up with the right plan to make sure that we're really in the best possible config for entry. Shuttle's an expensive piece of gear, and we should do everything we can to protect it.
Hi, I'm Sunny Williams, the newest member of the Atlantis crew, and here you see me, the one with the longer hair, and Swanee doing a hand controller calibration to get the arm ready to view the solar array deployment that we did today.
As you know, our big task for today was to deploy the 2 arrays that we've just attached to the station up here. And so here you see the crew. We had everybody involved in this task, watching mechanisms on the blanket boxes and on the array themselves during the deploy. Here you see Swanee in the background, me in the foreground, JR, there's CJ, and here's the whole crew all together as we were doing our deploy on 1A and 3A. And our first task was to get it out to about 15 and a half days out of 31 and a half days, and then it would bake out for a while, and then we deployed it the rest of the way out to 100%. And as you'll see here in a minute, we had a flawless deploy. The guys that did the work on these solar arrays obviously did a great job. And here you have a view of the array itself as it's being deployed. In the background, you can see that everything is going out very smoothly, and everything worked just as we expected it to, and we ended up with 2 brand new solar arrays to provide more power for the International Space Station. And here you see the 3A array just as we're starting to deploy, and you see the sunrise in the background there. And here's the beginning of the deploy as it starts on its way out.
As you know, we're getting ready to have our EVA number 2 tomorrow, and Swanee and Pat are in the airlock along with Clay Anderson, getting the EMUs configured right, getting all set up to do the EVA. A lot of work it takes to get everything ready. Here's Pat doing the PEMDAS experiment. Swanee also did this today, and along with Sunny has worked on this, and you can see him doing all the data recording there for the ground, the team in Huntsville. Here's a little break catching an almond in my mouth that Danny was floating over there. We know kids like that stuff. Here's a little more of PEMDAS. Pat's using the joystick on the other side now as he tracks the display on the screen. Here's Swanee with the mini workstations all configured and ready to go. One of the things we brought up for the station crew on the shuttle was some fresh apples, and here I am giving some for Fyodor, and Oleg, you can see how surprised and happy he was. He said this was some of his favorite food.
The next task at hand was to reposition both the shuttle and the station arm so we get some good views on the solar array. In this case, myself and Brew are in the process of maneuvering the space shuttle robotic arm over from the starboard side over to the port side to support the EVA tomorrow and the solar array retract.
Okay, here you see Steve Swanson getting ready to do a water container fill. We're doing a number of these on Shuttle. They share our water with the space station. They use it for a number of reasons, for potable water as well as technical water and some of their equipment, namely the Electron. Here's JR doing some more transfer activities this afternoon. That was a large day this afternoon for JR and some of his crewmates. And here's Swanee just continuing with that water fill. Takes about 50 minutes to fill that bag of water before we bring it over to station. You can see as in this case Steve's filling a bottle for technical water, and he's adding some silver biocide into that water. If it was potable water, we'd add the silver biocide as well as other chemicals. Myself starting to get a little more acclimatized to the environment of the station. Still taking it very slow though. Here, myself and Ola Kotov are doing a little some more robotic activity. This is in conjunction with the activity that Daniel Levis was doing earlier on the shuttle arm. In preparation for tomorrow's spacewalk by Pat Forrester and Steve Swanson, the ground team will be moving the mobile base system overnight. But before they do that, we had to reconfigure the space station robotic arm and put it in a proper configuration for movement of that mobile base station. And here, again, myself and Ola Kotov, our space station crew partner, is performing that operation. And after yesterday's EVA, we had some equipment that was we were having to rebag and stow for the 118 guys to carry home. And there you see Danny putting one of the blanket boxes that we opened up last night, and the blankets were deployed today. And we had a fair bit of this stuff, so it took a couple of these large CTBs to hold it all. And here you see just how big some of that hardware is that we were carrying up on in the back of the orbiter. And a slightly less graceful translation through the laboratory. And here's Swanee working out. We get a little bit of exercise every day to keep ourselves in shape, and we've got the ergometer on the mid-deck, and there you see Swanee working out. And here's Pat and Swanee in the equipment lock getting their suits ready just prior to them starting their pre-breathe and overnight camp out. And those guys are in the airlock tonight as we speak. And they're getting ready for their EVA tomorrow. And that's it from STS-117.
Good morning, Atlantis. That song was for Brew.
Hey, good morning, Shane. How you doing? Good morning to you, Richard, and the rest of the Orbit 3 team. And thanks for that song. And thanks very much to my 3 kids. I'm sure they picked it out, Jamie, Matt, and Mari. And good morning to my wife, Kelly. I appreciate it. Great way to start the day. And having said that, we'll take the crowd config if you got it for me.
This is Mission Control Houston, the crew on board the Space Shuttle and Space Station complex preparing for today's spacewalk and the continual retraction of the 2B solar array wing. That is the wing that extends to the starboard side of the P6 truss element on top of the station. That retraction will be worked on by Atlantis Commander Rick Sturko and Mission Specialist Jim Riley.
And retract command being sent on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
Copy.
And abort command sent.
Copy.
And Houston, Atlantis for solar array. Looks like things are folding fairly nominally with the exception of those 2 short leader folds on the FCC strips on the right blanket box.
Thank you, JR.
And the other item of note is the leader panel with the spring is still on the outside or the active side of the tension bar at this point. It's just kind of waving back and forth on that side of it. It'll be a little difficult for us to get at it to cut it is the point.
Thanks, JR. We're looking at it.
Houston ISS, retract command sent on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
Copy. Airlock Houston on Space to Ground 2. We see you reaching the upper limit for oxygen, so we'd like you to doff the masks. You have reached your time.
And abort command set.
And Houston airlock, that is complete.
Thank you, airlock. Copy, JR. ISS Houston for retract. We think we see some bunching. We're going to put another wiggle in work, so it'll be about 10 minutes if you concur.
And we concur.
That's in work.
ISS Houston for retract. We'd like you to take a good look at the left blanket box and look for an inverted grommet.
It worked.
Okay, Houston, in the left blanket box, the inner guide wire there next to the mast, there's 3 or 4 grommets that are pointing down toward the box, if that's what you're asking about. And then there's one that points straight like it ought to, straight toward me, and then there's one right above it that's pointing down.
Thanks, BJ. We copy.
If you're thinking another wiggle test, that's probably a good idea. We didn't see it happen, but the last time when I called you about, you know, the bottom one pointing down and the one above it pointing up and so forth, we didn't see it clear, but they would definitely clear the first motion of that wiggle test.
I understand, CJ. I'm going to put one more wiggle in work.
Okay, we're standby.
This is Mission Control Houston with the view on the outside of the International Space Station looking starboard down the truss structure with the space station robotic arm extended out to the left to assist with the 2B solar array wing retraction. The 2B array is the one on the left that extends out to the starboard side atop the station on the P6 truss. That wing has been retracted 7.5 of the 31.5 mast bays, the mast in the center, the structure that retracts or extends the entire solar array wing. The spacewalkers going through final steps before depressurizing the Quest airlock for the beginning of the spacewalk. This is Mission Control Houston with the view of spacewalkers Pat Forrester and Steve Swanson working on the 2B solar array wing that is on the top of the station, the P6 truss. Forrester working at the end of the Space Station Robotic Arm, Canadarm2, which is being operated by Mission Specialist Sonny Williams and pilot Lee Archambault. Swanson is working from the base of the solar array wing. This is a view from a video camera on Steve Swanson's spacesuit, looking out towards where Pat Forrester is working on the end of the Space Station Robotic Arm. Floating into view at the bottom of the screen is Swanson's tool, the hockey shape, so-called hockey stick tool because of its shape.
Houston, Atlantis, Underground 2 for the solar arrays.
Go ahead, CJ.
I tell you, 3 out of the 4 places where there was billowing of the arrays as they weren't quite setting down in the box the right way have been fixed. And JR is going to say, after we cut that leader, Pat cut that leader, JR is going to send him all the way outboard on the right box to get the last one, which needs to be fixed out there where the SCC is not quite right.
Okay, and the station folks copy also.
That really worked good, just having Swanee do that little bit with the hockey stick really did a lot of good.
Now this is the view to remember right here. Yeah, it's amazing, huh? 10 seconds, Swanee. Just agreeing with Pat. Pretty nice view. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's priceless, isn't it?
Pat, you're about 3/4 of the way through the maneuver.
Okay, Bruce, thanks.
This is a view from the helmet cam on Pat Forrester's spacesuit looking at Steve Swanson.
Motion, keeping it coming, Pat. And Swanee, Brew, can you verify we got good clearance off the top of Pat's head?
Let me change my position. Hold on.
And maybe we get the shuttle guys to verify that.
Yeah, I still got a good 6 feet, Brew.
Thanks, Pat.
That's good motion. About 2 more inches. Okay, that'll do it right there, I think, Brew.
The controls, Pat, you're in position, hold.
Okay, I just gave it a little tap. It's swinging back out. And, JR, we talked about it. Let me ask the ground. Would they like for me to cut it on the Kapton portion or on the metal? We talked both ways. They've got their choice. And Megan, do you copy?
JR on the metal.
Okay. On the metal. Hey, good job, Pat. Nicely done, Pat.
Houston, Atlantis, Underground 2 on a solar array.
Go ahead, CJ.
The center guide wires clear the power cable.
Yeah, Megan, I don't know if you saw when Swanee did those other ones, it made it better. It's just better to have Pat do this right now and get it all squared away, and we'll be ready to retract very soon here.
And CJ, that sounds like a good plan.
Good motion, Brew. We're going to go about 2 more feet. All right. Bonnie, I've got a good position now, so why don't you, if you want to just hold. Okay. I can just hold like this if you want to take it. Yeah.
Houston, Atlantis, Underground 2 for solar arrays.
Go ahead, CJ.
Megan, if it works out with the arm ops and we get Pat out there quick enough, we are going to be looking to get a go for a retract while it's still daylight here in this
I have it. think Brew's still moving.
CJ, we concur with that plan.
Stop motion.
Motion is stopped.
My tether's on it, the bail's locked. Yours is coming off. I'm ready for mine. You ready? Here it comes. Thank you. Okay, Brew, we'll take that up motion now.
Coming back up, Pat. And Pat, as we get to very near the top, we're going to be real slow because I noticed that our arm was unfolding quite a bit. We still had room to go a little higher, but we're going to start to reach our limit is how high we can get you.
Copy.
Up motion and work.
Good motion.
Copy, good motion.
This is Mission Control Houston, Mission Specialist Pat Forrester riding along on the end of the space station robotic arm being operated by pilot Lee Archambault and Mission Specialist Sonny Williams. Moving him into position to work with one more area on the solar array wing that the crew noticed was not folding correctly. Commander Rick Storko reporting earlier that 3 of the 4 areas have been fixed using the tools to help with the panels to fold correctly.
All right, I'm in on it. Get the tool back out.
And then let's try that front folder, Pat.
Yep.
And then we're gonna check the grommets, but they all look good from out here.
Okay, that's what we wanted to do right here. You see that, JR?
Yep.
My WBS? So you want me to just hold it here for a little bit, see what we can do, or you think that's got it taken care of?
I think we probably got it taken care of. We're ready to press if you guys want to get in position.
All right, I'm going to slide this out and see what we got.
That looks perfect, Pat.
I think it's got it.
Excellent. Okay, get yourself in viewing position, and with the ground concurrence, we're going to start a retractor as soon as you guys give us a go.
Okay, you want me on that center guide wire?
Yes, sir, or just right there. In fact, just back out 3 feet or so if you can, whichever way works best for Brew, and we'll go.
Okay, back 3, Brew.
Okay, retract on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Abort that.
Okay, Megan, it's doing the same thing on the right blanket, and what we're going to have them do is fluff it all one last time, and I think this is going to be about it for this EVA, if you guys concur.
CJ, we copy all and concur with your plan.
So the next retrack will be tomorrow after we get done fluffing here.
Copy.
Okay, Pat and Swanee, here's the big picture plan. We're going to fluff these as best you can get them, and set them up for a retract tomorrow. And we're going to call it quits on this part of your job for today. Excellent job, and we'll press on to the rest of our Sarge tasks.
All right, copy.
This is Mission Control Houston, now 2 hours and 47 minutes into today's spacewalk. This helmet camera view from the spacesuit of Pat Forrester as he and astronaut Steve Swanson move to the newly installed S3 truss element here to install brace beams, each of them installing 2 on the Solar Alpha rotary joint for this truss.
All right, JR, Bravo 6, Delta 2, torque and turns.
No, it's Bravo. Yeah, it's another. No, on this one it is Bravo 6, counter 2, and around 11 turns. 11 turns. Torque and turns is on the engage.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're looking now at a view from the helmet television camera on the spacesuit worn by Pat Forrester. Forrester and Steve Swanson continuing on their spacewalk, now 4 hours and 3 minutes in duration. Forrester right now working on
I think I got it, Jim.
installation of the drive lock assemblies for the newly installed solar array rotary joint
Bravo 7, counter 2.
on the S4 truss structure. He has a specific sequence of bolts that he has to work with to make sure that they're properly installed.
Okay, that one's done. Anyone taking any bets? Give it any odds. Should have taken it.
Meanwhile, as these two spacewalkers continue EVA number 2 of the STS-117 mission, mission managers have completed today's meeting and have made a decision to go ahead with the option that would call for a repair of the solar array blanket that is damaged on the port or left orbital maneuvering system pod on the 3rd spacewalk coming up on Friday.
5/8 of a turn to the hard stop, and remember the thing we were talking about. Yes.
On that EVA, spacewalkers Jim Riley and Daniel Levis will attend to the blanket was seen to be pulled back after launch early on in their spacewalk.
Atlantis, Houston, big loop for EVA and the DLA engage plan.
Go ahead, Megan.
Okay, what we'd like to do is we'd like to send, first of all, the DLA-1 command, which we think will actually engage DLA-2, but we'd like a crew member to be present to verify that DLA-1 does not engage. Following that, we will send the DLA-2 command to engage DLA-1, and we'd like the crew member then to verify that DLA-1 does engage. And at on a different EVA, we will go back to verify that DLA-2 is engaged.
Copied it all, JR.
Atlantis for EVA, you should see the engage.
I see motion. I see a good engage right now. Tell me what you need me to do with my WBS, JR.
Okay, stand by, Pat. I'm going to shift lenses.
You want to let them know we see a good engage?
Yep, I will. And Houston, Atlantis for DLA. Pat sees a good engage. Brake, Pat. Turn to your, or move to your right. That's good. Stop right there. Come back just a little bit. Stop. Come back about half an inch to your right. A little more. There you go. Good. Right there. And Houston, Atlantis, we can confirm that you have good tooth engagement on DLA-1.
This is Mission Control Houston. You can see those teeth of the gears that they're talking about in this view from the helmet camera on Pat Forrester. They're very tiny teeth on that long race ring. This is the area they're looking at the drive lock assemblies to make sure that they're in the proper configuration before they close the cover.
Your go to reinstall the cover.
Okay, Pat, we can put the DLA cover back on. Copy. Okay, I can report that the DLA cover's on with 4 bolts to torque.
Okay, and the last note in the procedure here is you could release the cover bolts 1A and B on cover 6 prior to getting out of there.
Okay, thanks, JR. I'm already kind of set up for that. And I will recover my tethers.
Atlantis, Houston for EVA with a clarification.
Go ahead, Megan.
And JR, this may already be clear to you, but since we only have one of the DLAs, we need you to leave one of the launch restraints alone without breaking torque, either launch restraint 2 or launch restraint 5.
And copy that, Megan.
All right, JR, 6 volts to torque. Cover 10, cover 7.
Copy that. That's our last launch lock and last cover there, Pat.
I agree. 4 Bravo, torque token. And with that said, I'd like to thank the folks on the ground that did all the work on coming up with the technique for those bolts.
Yes, indeed. Haven't lost one.
I concur with that. Okay, so did I hear the plan was for me to go stow this and pack up that bag?
Yeah, I'm thinking that would be a place to go next, and then we'll make a call from there. How's that sound, Pat?
Sounds good.
Because Swanee's heading down for launch restraint number 5 to break torque. He's already done 3B and 4B.
All right.
That'll leave 6B and 1B to do, and we'll take a quick hack when you get finished with that bag.
That tells me that I need to continue on around this way if he's down to 5.
Yeah, I'm going that. You're right. It's exactly the way I was planning.
Yep.
Thanks for picking that up, Pat.
Yeah, so I can't come around kind of the way I normally come. I'll do this, then I'll head back over the other way.
And Pat, when you've finished with that installation of that launch lock, one of the things we're going to do is we're planning on leaving that large trash bag out there for the next EVA when we release those launch restraints.
Okay.
And then we'll be bringing everything else back in. So you might want to take a look at what you think might be the best plan there.
All right. You never want to be the guy that has to put the last one in this thing.
I was just thinking that thought.
Yeah, sorry about that, Pat.
Nope, it's all good.
Okay, Swanee, head straight on in.
All right. I'm going to work this bag right here. Let me get that in real quick if you don't mind. I'll try to put it in front of me. That didn't work. But it did. There we go.
This is Mission Control Houston, spacewalkers Steve Swanson first, and then Pat Forrester re-entering the Quest airlock crew lock as they get ready to end their spacewalk. Now 6 hours and 55 minutes in duration so far, as the shuttle station complex orbits 215 miles over the southern Indian Ocean, just off the southern coast of Australia.
Your safety tether is where you left it?
Copy that, Pat. We're ready to have you hop inside.
All right.
Today was our second EVA. You can see here is patent 20 in the airlock as part of their oxygen pre-boost protocol. They spent the night in that airlock, and this is us getting them out first thing in the morning, getting ready for to putting them in the suits. Prior to getting into the suits, we need to depress the airlock down to 10.2 psi, and this is part of the procedure where we're closing the hatch into the equipment lock.
And early this morning we started, while those guys were getting ready to do their EVA, we did the initial retracts on the solar array, which actually went a lot better than we anticipated today. And we were able to get about 5 days in before these guys even went outside. Here you see the array itself, and as you can see, it looks like it's in pretty good shape overall. There doesn't seem to be any backfolding anywhere, and everything was coming in pretty normally. And it was a team effort to do that. CJ was watching as the retract was coming in, and I was executing the commands on the PCS and backed up by Brew in the lab. Meanwhile, these guys are getting suited up and getting their safers on and ready to go out the door. There's 20 right there. There I am. The safer is something that is used for an emergency aid rescue in case EVA crew member might come off of structure without a tether. And so they're installed, and that's Sunny installing it right there. Okay, this morning, Oleg Kotov and myself got the robotic arm in position so it would be ready for Pat Forrester when he got out on the EVA this morning. Okay, we're all suited up, and Sunny is helping put us in the airlock, and Danny, that's 20 that they're putting in there right now. Once we're in there, they'll close the hatch and depress it, and it'll be time to go to work. While we were doing that, Drew Archambault was moving the space station robotic arm into a position that I could then do some final commands to have the opportunity to install an APFR, a foot restraint, where a crew member stands, and then I would climb into that foot restraint. Well, the time arrived, and it was just getting dark as we were coming out of the hatch. That's me coming out first. I'll come out and set up a few tethers and receive some tools from Steve Swanson, and then he'll come out right after me. And then while these guys are outside, I was doing the IV task, repeating the job that Pat did for us on EVA-1 from the inside, and a couple of tools that we have in the background of video, and of course a few of them directly. The other things that we had going are their wireless video systems on top of their helmets, which gives us a great eye-in-the-sky view of what these guys are doing. Okay, at this time we got Pat on the arm. He just ingressed the APFR, and I was just starting to move him away. Pat initially gives me commands how to get in proper position, but then I'll manually maneuver him to a position where we then command another automated procedure to put him in a position to view the solar array wings.
And while Pat was doing that, I was working on fluffing the solar array and helping it get more prepared for another retract. And then Pat, when he first got to the solar array, he had to cut a leader off that was loose, had a spring on it. He cut that off and put it into his trash bag. Looks like surgeon's tools there. And then we cut it. We were all very happy with that moment. One problem solved. A few more to come.
We had a great view out the PLT windows. We were clearing the arm for Brew and Oleg while they were flying Pat around up there. And actually, Sonny was up and assist there. And great arm flying by Brew and Sonny today. Now you can see Swanee still hanging out there on the mass canister and also giving good clearance calls.
There you can see some of the camera views that we, Sonny and myself, used to provide clearance for Pat as we maneuver around. In addition to those clearance views, we got some real good clearance views from the commander and JR in the shuttle out the pilot window and the forward window, so that helped speed things along, being able to get clearance from those guys.
You can see in this particular view the solar rays being brought in while we got the two EVA crew members out there assisting with the retraction. The solar ray was brought in, one segment at a time, and then we would stop and pause and verify that we had good clearance to continue to move it further on in. Once that was complete, now they had to go and get to work. And that's myself, Steve Swanson, coming out right there to work on the Sarge. Our first task we had to do was the Sarge braces, and then we moved into the launch locks. Here's JR and again, he really helped us out today. There were a few issues that we came across, and he and the ground both helped us out tremendously today to accomplish our EVA. This is a view from the cameras of the EVA crew members. We have cameras on our helmets, and they show the outside. Here's CJ as he's helping out. We still got to do the routine shuttle maintenance, so Brew and I are vacuuming all the filters and making sure everything's kept cooled and getting filtered air the whole time.
After we had completed the EVA, all that we were going to do today, it was time to come back in the hatch. They bring us back in, and we'll repress the hatch. And they're sitting right there, waiting for the pressure to come up, and once it does, she'll open that. And they'll go in there and bring us in and get us out of our suits. And couldn't be done without the support of the IVs. There's Danny. He was the lead IV today as far as our suit up and getting us out the door and back in.
All in all, a really great day. These guys worked really, really hard and did a tremendous job. Meavy, they came in and were hungry from a hard day's work, and we took care of their suits, and they went back to the shuttle to go have something to eat and get ready for bed. And here's the EVA team.
Good evening and welcome back to the Johnson Space Center for tonight's mission status briefing after a busy day in orbit. With us to discuss all of the latest on Atlantis' flight to the International Space Station is Kelly Beck, the lead STS-117 Space Station Flight Director, Keith Johnson, the lead spacewalk officer for this mission, Mike Suffredini, the International Space Station Program Manager, and John Shannon, the Deputy Space Shuttle Program Manager and Chairman of the Mission Management Team. And we'll start off with Kelly.
Well, good evening, everybody. We had a very successful day today. The crew started out their day with doing preparation activities for the spacewalk, as well as beginning the retraction of the 2B array. While Pat Forrester and Steve Swanson were getting suited up with the help of Danny Olivas and Sonny Williams, we had Commander Rick Sturco, Jim Riley, and Lee Archambault. We call him Brew, so if I slip and refer to him as Brew, you'll know who I'm talking about. They started the retraction of the 2B array while the crew was getting suited up. That actually went better than we had anticipated. If you recall, we were expecting to have problems with the panels folding properly and getting some of the guide wires hung up that would cause us to have problems with the retraction. We actually got further than we anticipated without the help of the spacewalking crew, and we got it retracted about 25% of the way before the crew went out the door. Then we proceeded on, and during the spacewalk, Pat and Steve then got up to the work site and assisted with the retraction, and with their help we were able to get it to just not quite halfway retracted. They went out and helped us clear some of the problems that were causing the array to hang up and not fold in properly, so that went really well for us. Keith's going to go into more of the details of the spacewalk, just sort of the highlights. We did get further than we had anticipated with the 2B retract. We didn't get quite as far with the solar alpha rotary joint prep tasks, quite as far as we had anticipated, but overall we got a lot done and it was a very successful EVA. Crew they were outside a little over 7 hours of spacewalking time, so a lot of productivity from the amount of time they were out there. Today, the mission management team did make the decision that we will be doing the OMS pod blanket repair activity on the next spacewalk. So what the crew will be doing tomorrow primarily is getting prepared for that EVA, doing some procedure review and having conferences with us on the ground to go over those techniques and the plan. And we'll also be trying to do some additional retraction of the 2B array to see how far we can get without further assistance from the spacewalking crew. So on that third spacewalk, our plan would be to go ahead and repair that blanket, and then also to try to do some additional retraction of the 2B array. So all in all, very good day, and I will hand it over to Keith to give you some more details on the EVA.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. We started off the EVA knowing that we had a problem with the leader, and I have one of the leaders right here. There is a spring that's at the base of this leader that broke while it was on orbit, and that was noticed by Mike Lopez Alegria on a previous mission, and when the spring broke, it allowed this piece to flip backwards and forward. What we were concerned about was that if it had a piece of spring at the bottom, it could get folded in, and then when we compress the solar array blanket during the retract, it could cause damage. So we were concerned with that. A couple days ago, the crew took pictures of this, and they noticed that the spring was in fact attached at the bottom, which was the condition we knew that we needed to cut this with. So we reconfigured the tools to make sure we had the pair of scissors and the correct tools to get this in position and to cut it off. The crew was successful in getting that piece removed. They put it in their trash bag, and they brought this piece in with them, so that's now out of the way. After that, we also saw from the same pictures from Mike Lopez Alegria that the flat connector circuits that are on either side of a solar array blanket had tended to fold the wrong way, and the problem with that is that they could poke out of the solar array blanket when we're trying to compress it. So we had a tool that we developed on the ground, and you can see they call this the hockey stick, and then it's kind of obvious where its name came from. But this is some Teflon sheets that are Kapton taped together. We're worried about open circuit connection and causing a shock hazard, so this tool is made completely non-metallic. This was a tool similar to this was built by Sunny Williams on board the space station. We sent her up plans to build this thing. She constructed it. The nice thing about this tool was that both crew members had an opportunity to use it. Steve Swanson came out the door with it, and he went up and poked at it while Pat Forrester was getting onto the arm. He was able to get the two flat connector circuits that were closest to the mass canister. And after that was done, he handed the tool off to Pat Forrester. Pat went to the outboard one and poked that into position. We continued the retract to make sure that it's in a good position so that tomorrow we can continue the IV retract that Kelly talked about. So we retracted enough bays that we think we're comfortable to get quite a few more tomorrow. So that's what that tool is for. Once the crew got done with that, they went back to the airlock and hooked up on the tethers that we headed out to the S3, S4 truss element. We started working on the Sarge brace beams. These beams changed the load path from a launch load to an on-orbit load. While the crew was out working on this, they found that it was a little bit difficult to get them in, but through some teamwork and some words from the ground, they got it into place, and so all 4 of the brace beams are in place. After that, they went on to install the second of the drive lock assemblies. We had a little bit of an issue trying to get that in place, but we finally got it where we want it, and it's now engaged and covered up. After that, they worked on launch locks. They got the remainder of the launch locks that need to be removed from Sarge. And the last task that we had hoped to do were the Sarge launch restraints, but we saved those for another day. And that's the completion of the EVA for today.
Mike.
Well, good evening. It's good to be here this evening. We talked a little bit about the work we had in front of us last night, and the team, it wasn't obvious when we're not doing things outside or deploying arrays. It's not obvious the work that the team is going through, but there was quite a bit of work to get the S3-4 truss power system up and running so that we could hand over the remainder of the loads on the 2B array that we then turned around almost immediately this morning and relieved the tension on the half-bay retraction I talked about last night. And all of that went very well leading up to that point, and we did relieve the tension on the array this morning shortly before 6 o'clock. And then, as I told you, we went right into about 10 o'clock after the crew was up and ready. We went ahead and started the retraction process. And Kelly's talked to you a little bit about that. But I will tell you about an event that occurred right as we were beginning the retraction this morning. As you know, last night Joel talked to you about the Russian segment computers having both guidance, navigation, and control computers. There's 3 of those, or they're all redundant to each other, so any one of the computers can do the job. And then we have command and control type computers, also of which have 3 computers. We call them lanes, and any one of which can do the command and control function. And then we have light computers on the U.S. segment that talks to these computers. And so when we last left our heroes, we were on 1 lane each, and the flight control team was off doing the work we talked about, getting the system configured, and the crew went off to bed. During retraction this morning, for reasons that are not clear to us at this time, we lost both of those computers, and so and currently we're in that configuration. The guidance, navigation, control computers and the command and control computers in the service module are not functioning. Our Russian colleagues tried a number of techniques to try to recover the computers and were not successful. They have since stood down and gone off to meet with amongst themselves and with our colleagues to try to come up with some recovery steps that likely will be attempted when we start having ground passes over the Russian segment. As you probably know, the majority of the command and data that gets shipped back and forth to the Russian segment from the MCC occurs over Russian ground sites. The majority of those occur on the early orbits. We talk in terms of orbits. There's about 16 orbits a day, and so in the early orbits we typically come over the Russian ground sites. We cover quite a few of them, and then later in the day, in the higher numbered orbits, we don't cover the Russian ground sites any longer. And so our Russian colleagues will wait to start coming over to the Russian sites early tomorrow morning and probably begin the process of attempting to recover those computers again. So where does that leave us, you might be interested to know? Well, the guidance, navigation, and control computers allow the system to control the attitude and provide propulsion if necessary with the Russian thrusters. Without those computers, we can't get attitude control from the Russian system. That's not a problem for us. The CMGs, in fact, are controlling the attitude and done a fine job today. They're very low momentum on the system, and they've handled the stack very well. In addition to that, if they saturate, and you saw us do this yesterday, we can hand over to the shuttle system, and they can take care of the attitude control function. And in fact, we are working techniques to hand back to the CMGs from the shuttle verniers. We think we have a technique for that as well, and so that's not an urgent situation, but clearly we need to get this resolved before our shuttle friends leave. Command and control computers control things like the electron that provides oxygen, the Vosduke that scrubs the CO2, the humidity scrubbers, and the water processor. Those are the primary systems that they control. Things like the lights, the fans, thank God the potty, all of those things are working, and so the crew's in good shape because we have the seeder up and running, which by itself can handle almost 9 crew, and of course we have plenty of LIO for the balance of the crew, so that's not an issue. We have plenty of oxygen. Before we ever took off, we had done an assessment on the amount of O2 we had without an electron operating at all, and we had 56 days, which of course is way more than we need. So that's fine. We of course scrubbed the condensate on the U.S. segment, and that's fine, and we've got plenty of potable water for the crew to drink because every day we get a couple bags of water from our shuttle friends. So we have plenty of the resources, and so we have plenty of time to sort this out. We have, in the history of the program, often had these computers go down 1 or 2 lanes. It's not uncommon to be on 1 lane of each system and wait for the last one to finally give up, and then the whole system reboots itself and starts back up. And of course what's unique is when the system went to reboot itself, it wasn't able to do that. We are in meetings. In fact, I came from one to come to this meeting, and I'll go back to it when this is over, discussing techniques and options for trying to resolve the issues that may be causing this problem. There's a number of things you can imagine that we're looking at, everything from the external environment, the radiation environment. Have we had any electromagnetic storms lately? The answer to that's no, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. We've looked at the plasma environment. You know, we added a new truss. That's more surface area. We also added arrays, which also affects the environment, the plasma environment around the space station. But the plasma control units are working fine. In fact, they're hardly working at all, which implies that the environment is down where we would expect it, even though we've added this new element. We're looking for any new source of EME or EMI that we're not aware of. Of course, everything that flies gets tested for that before we ever fly it. The one that folks are starting to look at and scratching their heads a bit about is we did, of course, add another power source in the form of the S-34 truss, and so we're off to look to see if there's anything about that power source that may have affected the ability, that may make it slightly different for reasons that aren't clear. The power quality coming from that element that may have affected the ability of these computers to operate correctly. And then, of course, on the Russian segment, there's a number of things our Russian colleagues will look at as well to see if they can figure it out. So we're working through those options tonight. We'll begin in earnest tomorrow morning to try techniques to recover these computers. I fully expect us to be able to do this. I'm not thinking this isn't something that we will not recover from. But in the meantime, being NASA and the fact that we try to do everything we can to protect every option, we are looking at options to extend the time that the shuttle guys stay with us, just in case we'd like an extra day or so. We can't extend it much, but we're certainly looking at that. We're also looking at a number of different options how we conserve for prop if we decide we need more attitude control help from our shuttle colleagues than we had originally planned. So we're looking at how we manage the propellant, the O2, and any of the other resources necessary to see if we can extend a little bit longer if we need to. So that's the position we're in today. The vehicle's fine, and like I said, tomorrow I would expect this time tomorrow night we'll be telling you about our steps that got us at least one lane in each system up and running, and if not, how we continue to lead toward that position. So that's where we're at today. Overall, the ISS has done very well. As Kelly has mentioned, her team has done a fabulous job of getting us where we are today. The systems on whole have worked very well, and so we're very happy with the performance of the S34 truss as we brought it up. And as she said, from a retraction standpoint, I sat here and told you last night, and even though Joel's line said that it was going to be retracted by 1:46 today, we told you that the plan was set up to give us several days to retract the arrays, and I suspect by the time we're done with our EVAs, we'll have it in the box. And so from our perspective, the mission's gone very well in that respect. And that's all I have. Thank you.
John. Okay. I've been coming in and telling you how the MMTs have been going, the mission management team, and we met for about 4 hours today. It was fairly long. We spent 2.5 of those hours going over the operations and spacewalk engineers' plans on repairing the torn OMS pod blanket. And we did pick one repair method. All of these repair methods were assessed by crew members that had been out on spacewalks before. And the method we came up with was they were highly confident, is how they rated it, that it would be successful and something that could be done. We also took a look at our testing, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And it also was supporting very well. So we decided that the best course of action was to go ahead and try and add it on EVA 3 on Friday, and that's what we asked the ops team to go look at. Let's go to the first picture. This is just to reorient you. This is a picture that was taken from Space Station. It gives a little better view of the OMS pod blanket, and you can see not just the little corner, the little 4x6 inch triangular piece that is up, but the blanket right next to it, the one that's closest to you in the picture, also is pulled back a little bit from the tile, and we're going to address that as well. The repair method that they chose, that the MMT agreed with, the first step is that when the astronaut gets out there on the shuttle remote manipulator system, they'll pat down the blanket. And go to the next chart, please. And they can either use their gloved hands, or we have a tool. It's actually a scraper tool that you would use if you were going to do some other type of TPS repair, to go ahead and tamp it down. These blankets are very formable. If you remember the other day, the memory on that blanket, it will take the shape that you put it in and pretty much stay there. So we think we'll be able to push it down, and it'll stay in the slot very well. The next step that the astronaut would do is we're going to put a double row of staples. Go to the next chart, please. At the bottom of the blankets, you'll attach them with this medical stapler, and then you'll pull it together. And at the top row, you can run a row of staples. These are not your average office supply staplers. I have one here. It's called a medical stapler. Each one of these holds 15 stainless steel staples. That's hard to say. And it's just actuated by pushing down on this. And just like you would think if you were trying to close a wound, you don't have to use very much pressure. As the staple goes in, it kind of has hooks that go in to into the blanket in this case, and provides a very, very tight bond. A normal staple, you would think you can kind of bend it and twist it around. These staples are more like little fish hooks. They're very hard to change their shape. And they're also stainless steel, so that provides you quite a bit of not just strength but heat resistance as well. So after the crew staples it and attaches one blanket to the neighboring blanket, they're going to attach it to the tile that's directly in front of it. Let's go to the next one. And they will use two things. One is a nickel chromium pin that was developed in tile repair application. If we had a big gouge in a tile, we'd take these bags of insulation and pin them to the tile, and then put this overlay over the top of it. Well, we use those pins because they're heat resistant and they're very good at going in tile. And if you can come back to me, I'll show you here. Here's the pin. It's just a very straightforward piece of wire, but it's very stiff. It's kind of hard to bend. And what they'll do, we have a little mock-up over here is they'll take this this dental tool. It's just a piece of metal with a little probe on it. And I'll wait for the camera over here. You can go over. There we go. This is just the tile, and you can see if you try to, the pin, it's kind of hard to push into, and I'm kind of doing it. But what the crew will do is they'll just take this and they'll score the tile a little bit, and it's very easy just to push right in, and it stays pretty well. So with that tool and that pin, we think we'll be able to very easily secure the front of the blanket to the tile and not have any gap in there to let any airflow get in. If for some reason we're surprised and the blanket is not in as good a shape as we think it is, another method was suggested, and this is the stitching repair method, where they use that long curved needle that has some stainless steel wire attached to it to stitch it up. I think the likelihood of actually having to use this is very low. All of the astronauts that tried using the stapler were highly confident that it would work, but this will be a backup capability for us as well. You go to the next chart, just shows a little better picture of that dental elevator, which is just a metal probe that we can use to put a hole down through the blanket or a small hole in the tile to push the pin through. We spent a great deal of time today talking about the test schedule and what we want to do to prove to ourselves that what we're going to do is going to be effective. Let's go to the next chart. The first thing we did, and this is all complete, is the pull test. We took the different options, one of just pushing the blanket down and leaving it, not doing anything to secure it, the staples with pins, the stitching with pins, stitching with staples with pins. They did all of them. And they put a small bladder underneath the blanket and would pump it up to see how much force it could take, and that was supposed to simulate air getting underneath the blanket and pushing it up. All that was done. It was the team was very confident that the staples with the pins would meet our objectives. We do have a mock-up going to the ArcJet facility, and that's going to be tested late Thursday. And the reason for that is we have these stainless steel staples and these nickel chromium pins. They will see an environment of up to 1,000 degrees. It'll be somewhere between 700 and 1,000 degrees. So we'll do the repair on a blanket with the real staples and the real pins, put it in the ArcJet, and run it through a simulated entry profile. Because even though stainless steel melts at about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and it won't see near that, it will degrade the metal's capability. So we're going to put that in the ArcJet, we're going to put it through an entry environment, and then we're going to take it over to a wind tunnel at Texas A&M and hit it with the dynamic pressure that's expected during entry and see how the degraded metal in the staples and the pins holds up. We expect it to be very successful and not to have any problems at all. But that's the wind tunnel test that we're going to do. Then if everything we did was wrong, or if for some reason we weren't successful and we got heat down there, I've said a couple of days in a row that we don't have very much understanding of that graphite epoxy honeycomb, what heat does to that. So we're going to go into our radiant heat facility, and we're just going to heat that graphite epoxy up, a cavity about the same size as we're talking about here, 4 by 6 inches. And we're going to test it just to see the impact on that honeycomb epoxy. It'll be some good data to have. I don't think it will be relevant to what we're going to see on entry. The only other real topic of discussion that we had was, after we decided on EVA-3, was the discussions about the attitude control system on the space station, and Mike and his team briefed us, and we just talked through that and talked over different options for potentially staying an extra day and what that would take, and that was about it for the MMT today. Rob?
Thanks, John. Okay, we'll take questions. Jeremiah, let's start over here with Bill Harwood, and we'll work around.
Bill Harwood with CBS with two from Mike. I just need to bound this to make sure I understand what the issues are. What happens, just so I know, I think I do, but just so I know, what happens if you don't get them up and you have to leave? What does that do? And the second question is, when would you have to make a decision about a Group C power down or something like that to get the extra day? How long can you go before you have to decide something? Thanks.
Let's see, I'll do the second one first. We're deciding that now so that we have a chance of getting the extra O2 we need. So within the next few hours or the first part of tomorrow, I expect we will find ourselves looking at reducing some of the loads on the shuttle in order to get us the additional O2. The latter is we have to have propulsion of attitude control even with CMGs. That's the CMGs do a great job, but occasionally they get saturated, and when they get saturated, then we need propulsive attitude control in order to recover. The other, of course, need for propulsion is to make sure we can do debris avoidance maneuvers, to adjust our orbits for dockings. There's a number of reasons why we need propulsive attitude control and translation capability. So that's a requirement of the ISS, and so we have to have that capability. Does that answer your question?
Oh, it did, but it did. But if you would state what if you don't? What do you mean when it's a requirement? Does that mean you have to unman the thing? I mean.
Well, you know, we'd have to talk about all that. There's a lot of techniques we've created along the way as we've flown the ISS. Recently, we did a maneuver all on CMGs, which we hadn't done in the past. Generally speaking, when we used to use the CMGs for maneuvers, which we've done, we start a maneuver, and when we get to the end, we needed the jets just to stop us. Basically, the CMG saturated. Well, we recently maneuvered the space station, in fact, 2 or 3 times, I believe, where we started the maneuver, did the whole maneuver, and stopped the maneuver, all on CMGs. So we would look at all types of techniques to buy ourselves some time. We can always, like any critical problem, we can always leave ISS if we need to. Whether we would leave the ISS in this situation, I don't know, because we're always in a better config if we can keep the crew around to help us out. You know, I know what you want me to say, but I would tell you I haven't worked through it. I do not expect that in the next couple, 3 days, we won't be sitting here telling you that we've got these computers back and we've kind of understand why that occurred. I just don't see that as being a scenario by the time our shuttle friends leave. If we are in that position, we have an option to depart. We always have an option to do that. This is not the only scenario that we could find ourselves doing this. There's a number of different critical situations that could occur where you'd have to unman ISS, but I don't expect this to be one of them. But that would be the worst case scenario.
Mark. I'm Mark Crow, Houston Chronicle. I think I'm following up on a couple of points here, but is this a software problem or a hardware problem on the shuttle where there are spare parts? I'm sorry, on the station where there are spare parts? And then I have a follow-up to that, please.
If I knew that, Mark, I'd be sitting here telling you how I was going to fix it.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I could tell you, this appears to be, I would tell you from my knothole, this appears to be something that has occurred over the last few days. So that would tell me that all 3 computers didn't just all have a hardware failure, although we did suffer something similar to that several flights ago on the ISS side. It appears to me that something has changed in the environment. Either something in the environment or the source of power now to these computers is different coming from S3-4 that for reasons that we do not understand. It could potentially be software, although we have not uplinked a software change, but perhaps something's happened to the software. We can always reload it, and of course we will talk about that option. I'll tell you, our Russian colleagues believe it's the power source. That's the latest theory they have. They've suggested to us that they have suggested that perhaps, and we will look at this, perhaps we could disconnect from, we will stop feeding them power and let them just use their own internal power to bring up their computers and see if that solves that particular problem. They cannot run on their own power because of all the systems that run to handle the entire crew. We have to feed them a certain amount of power to keep everything running that we need to run. So eventually we'd have to work through that. Another option that we're working through is just stop feeding them power from S3 truss, which is maybe the first thing we'll try. But we're still sorting through our plans. But I don't think the hardware has magically, all 6 computers, which are all similar, I don't think that's the problem. I would suspect it's either possibly software or some external cause that we've got to sort through.
And I believe at some point, would not the shuttle, which is there to provide attitude control, I guess, through this situation, does it not run out of prop, and therefore it's not that useful for attitude control? And when does that happen, if that's a factor?
Well, it's extremely useful because we don't ever require any prop-related system to provide attitude control all the time. We're on CMGs right now. We've been on CMGs for the most of today, if not all of today. Have we been on CMGs? All of today. So the day before yesterday, when we were deploying arrays, it had to do with the amount of change in momentum the CMGs couldn't handle, the arrays going out, and what set of thrusters we used to control the stack, because certain thrusters point a certain direction, and depending on which array was going out, one was worse. So at one point we had the Russian segment backing up CMGs. In the other case we had the we had the shuttle with verniers actually doing the attitude control. At one point we went into free drift and we just stayed there for a little while. All of that was based on major momentum changing events. The next couple of attitude maneuvers or momentum changing events are the SARG. When we first activate the SARG, obviously until the restraints are done we won't be moving the SARG, so we've got a couple, 3 days before we even have to talk about that now. But we were going to hold off on that. We don't need to activate the SARG right away, so we were going to hold off on that. The other one is we had to do an attitude maneuver, do a dump. We'd planned to do a wastewater dump tomorrow. We postponed that for a little while we sort through this. So we don't have anything that requires us to do attitude maneuvers, and therefore the CMGs should be okay. If the CMGs have a problem, what typically will happen is they'll saturate. In this case, the shuttle will take over the load. It will take out the rates. It'll settle it all down, and the CMGs will take back over. So you're absolutely right. And we've gotten some numbers about how long it would take, and we're off working with our shuttle friends to pick attitudes and thruster combinations to get us as much a time as possible. But we can't have 24 hours of propulsive control every day, and shoot, I can't do that with the space station either. That's why the CMG's there. And the CMG, that's typical. CMGs are typically the device that are holding attitude in space station, unless we're doing major events like attaching solar arrays, and deploying solar arrays, attaching trusses, stuff like that. I don't know, John, if you wanted to comment more or not.
Let's go to Gina and then Todd.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News for Mike. Mike, describe these computers for me. And they're in the Russian segment. Describe them for me. And is this like booting up my laptop here? What's involved? And then, have you ever seen this before, this kind of failure?
Let's see, I don't know how to describe these to you. Nothing we do on space station is like booting your laptop, other than booting our laptops, which we do have a lot of on space station. So I've never actually commanded a Russian segment computer before, so I don't exactly know the steps you take. But it's a mill standard type computer. It's actually a European built computer that was provided by the Europeans years ago as part of the process of building up the service module. But it's not any different than any other computers in general. They're not exactly the same as the computers we have, but they're very similar in capability. They're Western style computers. But they'd be just like, if you saw one of our computers, it's just a black box with big connectors on the end. It doesn't look like anything. And the actual steps I don't know, but they're fairly simple. You send a command to it to go off and reach into a certain part of memory to activate a certain piece of software. A lot of things your laptop does for you, we would do manually. Just tell it, go get this code, go activate this code. Then the software starts running, it brings things up. And then we generally have to reconfigure it. We need to tell it what configuration we're in, what to expect, things like that. But it's not typically a lengthy process. And in the case of the Russian segment, whenever we lose the third lane, so I'll start by saying rarely do we have all 3 lanes up on either the guidance or the command and control. They lose sync over time, and then that one stays out, and then the 2 that remain will lose sync, and then one will be up. And then when that last one loses sync, it's automated. The process of bringing them back up is automated, and so the system goes up, it reboots all 3 of them, they all get synced back up, and then they move on, and then the ground has to do a few things to tell it again the configuration of the ISS. But it's a totally, if you're letting the system do it, so you can do it totally hands-off. This is what did not occur. This is probably the most interesting event. It wasn't that we were down to a single lane as much as when we lost the one computer, the final computer of the 3, the system went in to reboot itself and tried 2 or 3 times and was not successful. And so that's probably what's unique. So I would tell you that in the history of the program, we've until this flight, we had not been without all 3 computers for any length of time. We've had the last one fail and it reboot and bring them all back in the set, and that's a pretty, that happens pretty quickly. We don't really know, I mean, it occurs, we know it occurs, but if attitude control is being handled by the Russian segment, it picks back up with attitude control and we don't have to do much. So it's not insignificant that we've had 1 or 2 down. What is significant is that we've been without all 3, which we haven't been until this flight. This is the first time we've spent a long period of time without all 3 computers, and certainly without all 3 computers on both sides.
Todd?
Yeah, Todd Halverson of Florida Today. I was wondering, I don't think you answered the one question about whether there were any spares on board in terms of these command and control or GNC computers on the Russian side. And I was also wondering if you can't get them fixed, you stay in this exact same configuration and the shuttle has to leave, how long can you hang around without a propulsive capability up there?
Let's see, I'll answer the first one. I don't know. I haven't asked if we have spares, but I will tell you our Russian colleagues typically have a spare for everything that's on orbit. Again, you don't need all 3. The job can be done with 1. So from our perspective, if they have 2, they have 1 spare and 1 computer. So, but I haven't asked that question specifically, so I don't know if we have a spare in addition to the 3 that are in the 1 set. The other question is hard to answer right now. If the first thing that has to happen when a shuttle leaves is we have to handle the transient of the shuttle departure. Typically that requires a desaturation, requiring thruster control on the Russian segment. So the very first thing we'd have to do is figure out how to deal with a departure. So, I mean, immediately we'd be trying to figure out how to keep the vehicle stable without propulsive attitude control.
Mike.
Hi, Mike Schneider, Associated Press. Question for John. If you could just explain the rationale for choosing the 3rd spacewalk instead of the 4th spacewalk for the blanket repair.
Well, see, we talked it through for quite a while, and if you remember, I told you yesterday that the team had pretty much 100% consensus that we needed to do a repair to prevent any damage to the flight hardware, and we talked about it. It fit in either EVA, and after discussing it for a while, we kind of came to the point that this is something that we need to go do. It's a pretty high priority, and we would hate to pass up an opportunity while we're EVA to go do it. And the ops team is pulling together all the procedures and the training required for the crew on orbit, and I expect that they'll be able to make the Friday EVA. If they don't, or if they run into some kind of a hiccup, or the crew is busy doing something else, then the team would be very comfortable doing it on EVA 4. But we just thought the first opportunity was a good one, and we'd like to take it. It also it provides 2 additional things. It's 2 less days that you're flying around with this blanket that's up, and the other one is if something doesn't go right on EVA 3, you've got another chance on EVA 4 to do it again. So that was kind of the rationale that went into it.
It's late, so we're going to take about 1 or 2 more questions. So Mike, did you have a follow-up?
If you all decide that the shuttle should stay some extra time at the station, how many more days past what is now, I guess, the undocking day? Could you all stay up there?
Well, 1 is easy. If you remember, we just extended by 2 days our docked time frame, and the limiting consumable for me is cryogenic oxygen, which feeds the fuel cells, which provide power to the shuttle. And I had 18 hours of cryo for feeding those fuel cells above the 13 plus 2, which that's my 2 extension days for weather, for landing. 18 hours is getting pretty close to 24. We were supposed to provide 40 pounds of oxygen to the ISS, and we were going to do that on flight day 7. We decided at the MMT today to wait until flight day 9, I think, and Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong, to transfer that to ISS. And if it turned out that we needed that extra dock day, we just use that 40 pounds, and that would just about give us an extra day on orbit. If you were going to go past that one additional day, past next Wednesday, then you talk about eating into your contingency days that we typically use for landing weather problems. So that would be a much more difficult decision.
Jim and Tarek, and then we'll call it a day. Jay.
Hey, actually, for Rob, do you have any kind of training materials or pictures of these computers that we can get overnight?
We'll search for the computer pictures. Nothing readily available, but we'll take a look.
It'll be gray, a box with big connectors on the outside.
And it says Avicii machine. Yeah, okay. In terms of EMI, I just chasing down EMI comes to one of my nightmares. And have you looked at, in terms of external EMI? Have you had an experience in the past on ISS, for example, of getting a reaction from ground radars that may be pulsing you at high power? There are some new ground radars out there in the past 6 to 12 months that I've been watching the station, and I don't know if have you seen anything like that?
Well, I'll tell you that we're looking at all sources, including external sources, and they can come from off of the planet as well as on the planet. So we'll look at all sources of any sort of radiation that might be occurring on board ISS.
And finally, Tarek.
Thank you. Tarek Mack with Space News and Space.com for Kelly. I just kind of had a question about how the station crew is working through this problem with the folks at Russia's MCC. I mean, how much work did they have to divert because they are handling the computers? I guess what's the impact to them personally?
Actually, it's been very little impact in terms of the mission. We've got a very well integrated crew, and so while the shuttle crew has been busy with the spacewalk today, we did have the station crew who was able to work with Moscow and help them out for power downs and different activities. So it's been a very, just an excellent crew working together to get all the things that we need to get done to get finished. So it's went really well.
Okay, that'll wrap up the questions. We're going to get the briefers out immediately because they still have a lot of work to do tonight.
ISS aus einen neuen Außeneinsatz unternommen. Sie versuchten mit Spezialwerkzeugen ein verklemmtes Sonnensegel zusammenzufalten. Im russischen Teil der ISS fielen 2 Computer aus. Die NASA setzte für morgen einen neuen Außeneinsatz an. Dann sollen die Astronauten eine Isoliermatte am Hitzeschild der Raumfähre reparieren, die beim Start eingerissen war.
Das System auf der Raumstation ISS sorgt seit vergangener Nacht für Aufregung. Die Computer setzten aus, nachdem neue Sonnensegel die Energieversorgung übernommen hatten. Inzwischen laufen die Rechner im russischen Teil der Station teilweise wieder. Sie sind für die Navigation sowie die Luft- und Wasserversorgung zuständig. Im schlimmsten Fall hätten die Computerprobleme sogar zu einer Evakuierung der ISS führen können. Die beschädigte Außenisolierung des an der ISS angedockten Shuttles Atlantis soll morgen mit Heftklammern aus einem Erste-Hilfe-Koffer repariert werden.
Mit einem störrischen Sonnensegel und einem defekten Hitzeschild an der Raumfähre Atlantis zu kämpfen. Die Techniker arbeiten mit Hochdruck, Notfallpläne liegen bereit und die Raumfähre muss wohl länger im All bleiben.
Ein verhaktes Sonnensegel draußen an der Raumstation, es wieder zusammenzufalten, damit waren die Astronauten wenig erfolgreich gewesen. Das könnte die Stromversorgung geschwächt haben. Als dann die Steuerungscomputer im russischen Teil der ISS ausfielen, schien die Versorgung der Astronauten mit Sauerstoff und Wasser kurzfristig in Gefahr. Im Notfall hätten sie alle zur Erde zurückkehren müssen, doch die Russen sind dem Fehler auf der Spur. Sie haben es inzwischen hinbekommen, die Kommunikation des Zentralcomputers mit den russischen Computern in der Raumstation wiederherzustellen. Morgen wartet die nächste Herausforderung. Ein Loch in der Isoliermatte am Heck des Shuttles müssen sie flicken, mit Klammern, wie bei einer Operation. Das Erste, was die Astronauten machen, wenn sie am Roboterarm da rausgehen, sie werden die Isoliermatte wieder einfügen. Denn das Hitzeschild der Raumfähre muss funktionieren, wenn sie in einer Woche zur Erde zurückkehrt.
ISS sind mehrere zentrale Rechner ausgefallen, die die Navigation und die Sauerstoffversorgung steuern. Erst nach mehreren Stunden sei es gelungen, wieder einen Kontakt der russischen Computer zum Kontrollzentrum herzustellen, sagte ein NASA-Sprecher. Weitere Schwierigkeiten bereitete ein klemmendes Sonnensegel, das sich auch nach einem Außeneinsatz der Astronauten nicht einfahren ließ. Sollte es nicht gelingen, die Systeme der ISS zu reparieren, müsste die Besatzung möglicherweise die Station verlassen.
Die Besatzung der Internationalen Raumstation hat ihre Computerprobleme noch immer nicht im Griff. Die von Daimler-Benz für die ESA entwickelten Rechner reagieren empfindlich auf Geräusche und schalten sich deshalb immer wieder ab. Auslöser für die ungewohnten Geräusche ist offenbar ein neues Segment mit Sonnensegeln. An eine Räumung der ISS ist im Moment noch nicht gedacht. Allerdings müssen die Astronauten Strom sparen.
Und wir bleiben bei der Raumfahrt. Die US-Raumfahrtsbehörde NASA hat die Möglichkeit einer Evakuierung der internationalen Raumstation ISS wegen der andauernden Computerprobleme als äußerst unwahrscheinlich bezeichnet. Allerdings werde es noch einige Tage dauern, bis die Ausfälle im russischen Teil der Raumstation zu behoben seien. Die Besatzung der Raumfähre Atlantis wurde zum Energiesparen aufgefordert, um zur Not noch einen Tag länger im All bleiben zu können. Am Mittwoch waren im russischen Teil der ISS mehrere Computer gleichzeitig ausgefallen, mit denen die Raumstation auf Kurs gehalten wird. Und zu diesem Thema bin ich jetzt telefonisch verbunden mit Friedhelm Klaasen vom Deutschen Zentrum für Luft- und Raumfahrt. Einen schönen guten Morgen.
Guten Morgen, Frau Müller.
Noch scheint der Computerausfall ja nicht vollständig behoben zu sein. Was sind denn die Schwierigkeiten?
Das sind 2 Computersysteme, die betroffen sind von dem Ausfall. Einmal das Lageregelungssystem, zum anderen aber auch interne Kontrollsysteme, die auch die Lebenserhaltungssysteme unterstützen. Es sind nicht die Computer selber ausgefallen oder nicht durch Fehler im Computersystem der Ausfall entstanden, sondern durch die neue Stromversorgung jetzt aus den geänderten Solargenerator-Konfigurationen. Man hat gestern geschafft, die Computersysteme kurzzeitig anzusprechen und man wird heute im Laufe des gesamten Tages jetzt Datenauswertung betreiben, woran diese Ausfälle liegen könnten. Wichtig ist, dass dieses Lageregelungssystem im Moment vom Shuttle unterstützt werden kann und zusätzlich natürlich auch noch vom amerikanischen Gyroscope-System. Und selbst wenn der Shuttle abgedockt hat, gibt es weitere Möglichkeiten über ein russisches Versorgungsschiff Progress, was auch an der Station angedockt ist, mit dessen Raketentriebwerken Lageregelung zu betreiben. Es ist also noch eine relativ unkritische Situation.
Nun wurde die Besatzung der Raumfähre Atlantis zum Stromsparen aufgefordert. Wie muss man sich das Leben für die Astronauten da oben jetzt vorstellen unter diesen Bedingungen? Ist es anders?
Es gibt keine wirklichen harten Einschränkungen, aber es wird natürlich auf viele Kleinigkeiten geachtet. Zum Beispiel werden Drucker abgeschaltet oder Laptops werden abgeschaltet, wenn man sie nicht benötigt. Auch werden Reserveressourcen, die an Bord des Shuttles sind, im Moment nicht zur Raumstation transferiert, wie es sonst üblich ist, bevor ein Shuttle abdockt, sondern man versucht eben wirklich so lange wie möglich mit dem Shuttle dran zu bleiben. Wahrscheinlich wird die Mission von Dienstag enden, sollte bis Mittwoch verlängert. Man hat den größten Teil der benötigten Ressourcen dafür schon zusammengespart.
Herr Klaassen, ich danke Ihnen für diese Informationen.
Bitte.
To make a third spacewalk Friday to repair a torn thermal blanket on the Space Shuttle Atlantis. Meanwhile, the U.S. Space Agency says it's still working to fix a computer problem on the International Space Station. Atlantis, which is docked with the space station, will stay an extra day in orbit as precaution.
It was the last thing that NASA needed. There's never been a computer crash as bad as this on board the International Space Station, and it's left Russian and American scientists scrambling to fix the problem. The computers were made in Russia, but so far Russian engineers haven't been able to figure out what's gone wrong, and neither has anyone else.
This is Mission Control Houston, now 2 hours and 47 minutes into today's spacewalk.
NASA has wasted no time addressing the immediate issues. Both the oxygen and water supply on board are run via the computer system. NASA insists that those on board are not in any danger because a backup system which has nearly 2 months' supply of air has already been activated. The space station moves at more than 17,000 miles an hour. Normally the computers would keep it stable, but since they've crashed, the power of the shuttle is being used as a substitute. But that in itself could present a problem. There's only a certain amount of fuel on board the Shuttle Atlantis, so it has to undock from the space station by next Wednesday at the very latest to return to Earth.
Okay, good deal. Doesn't look too bad.
Naturally, NASA's main concern is for the 10 astronauts and crew on board. Every effort is being made to conserve the power that they have left, and flight controllers are planning to reboot the whole system to see if that helps. If it doesn't, NASA may have no choice but to instruct the astronauts and crew members to abandon the International Space Station. Wendy Urquhart, BBC News.
Good afternoon and welcome to this mission status briefing about International Space Station operations during Space Shuttle Atlantis' STS-117 mission. Here to give us an update, Bill Gerstenmaier, Associate Administrator for Space Operations. We'll begin with brief remarks before taking questions. Bill.
Thanks, Catherine. Kind of wanted to come talk to you today and just kind of give you a status of where things are. I know there'll be a press briefing later today, but I thought it'd be worthwhile to come kind of give you the latest status of where we are and what's happening on board the space station. Last evening, I think Mike Suffredini told you that we'd probably come in this morning and we'd have both computers up and running and operating on the Russian segment. We did that momentarily this morning. For about a 7-minute period this morning, we had 1 lane of each one of the Russian computers up and operating, and that allowed us to send some commands from the U.S. segment over to the Russian segment that took some essentially computer-controlled circuit breakers and put those in a better configuration. So then if the computers went down again, which they did in about 7 minutes after they were up, they'd stay in that configuration, and that put us in a better power configuration between the functional cargo block and the rest of the space station. So again, I think I would say at this point we're still in the middle of troubleshooting. You're going to see computers probably come up and down throughout the day. I think that's pretty normal in this configuration. The Russian team is trying to understand, along with the U.S. team, what the root cause is or why we're having the problems we are with the computers. So there'll be quite a bit of troubleshooting going on through the day. You'll see that troubleshooting concentrated over the Russian ground sites. So you may see the Russian crew members being up at the time that's not normally their sleep time to coordinate with the ground sites so they can do some things if it helps to have a crew member on board. We're still struggling to try to understand what the real problem is here. You know, as you change any configuration, the first thing you want to go back and look at, did any of the configuration change cause the problem you've got? So when we added the solar array, is there anything unique with that power or the electromotive interference that could be associated with that may be causing a problem? So we're going to try to isolate some of the new arrays from the Russian segment and see if that helps. We also have an oscilloscope on board. We'll probably be able to go ahead and take a look at some of the power quality to see if that's causing any problems, and then we'll continue to work with our Russian counterparts. I will tell you also that the teams are tremendously creative. As we go through this process, they continue to find new and better ways of doing things to leave station in a pretty good configuration. I think we've got some techniques that we're working on to provide attitude control to desaturate control moment gyros, etc., if it's needed after the shuttle departs, and that all looks fine. So again, the teams are pretty creative. They're working lots of solutions. They'll fill you in tonight on more of what those solutions are, but they look very good. The other thing that was good over the evening was that the control moment gyros stayed up, so we didn't have to go to shuttle propellant or shuttle thrusters at all during the evening. The momentum has been very low on board space station, and that's a good configuration. So I would tell you we're in a stable configuration. We're not really sure what caused this problem. We'll understand it. It's going to take a little bit of time to understand it because of the complexity, but once we understand it, we'll get station back in operating function and be more normal. But again, I don't see this as too off-nominal. This is kind of the things that we deal with a lot on board space station or with any complicated machinery that has these many components and these many computers operating in synchronous. So with that, I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. We'll begin with questions here at NASA's Johnson Space Center. Please limit yourself to one question as Mr. Gerstenmaier is on a tight schedule, and this will be a 30-minute briefing. Let's begin here with Mark.
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle. Could the shuttle undock and take its crew back to Earth if the space station was in the current situation or configuration it's in now? And perhaps you could sort of explain what it is that you want to see bottom line before you could undock the shuttle with the station in this situation.
Okay. Ideally, we would like to have the Russian computer systems up and operating when the shuttle undocks, and in that way we can then, through more normal manner, command the thrusters on the space station to essentially remove the momentum associated with the docking attitude and desaturate the CMGs and then get back in control. Could we undock today in this configuration even with the computers down? I think we could. We would end up saturating the control moment gyros, and then we're looking at options of potentially using the Progress to provide that desaturating capability. If we could get in a configuration similar to this morning, we could send commands up from the ground to essentially desaturate the CMGs and get attitude control back for station. So ideally, we'd like to have the computers up and operating in some function before the shuttle departs, but if we had to have the shuttle depart now, it would be off-nominal for us, but the shuttle could depart and we would still be in a stable configuration with station.
Mike.
Mike Schneider, Associated Press. I was just hoping if you could put this in some kind of context. Is this one of the more serious problems that the station has had in its history? And then just a quick question, any decision yet on extending the Atlantis' stay at the shuttle, at the station?
Okay. You know, I don't know how to rate this in seriousness of other failures. We don't really know the root cause, so then it's hard to understand what caused the failure. There's a lot of challenges operating this extremely complicated spacecraft, and the systems are complicated, and so I don't know how to really rate this one way or the other. It's kind of forced us to look at off-nominal things and different ways to operate, but the teams are tremendously resilient at doing that and figuring out ways to go. So comes with the complexity of the systems comes a tremendous ability to reconfigure and a tremendous robustness. So even though this is a problem that we don't like and it changes the way we normally operate, there's still enough overall resilience in the space station systems that you can look at new and creative ways to put things together or string things together or tie things together that can still provide the same function. So I don't really have a clean answer for you there. In terms of the shuttle, we'll look at the right timing overall, and the teams will look at it over the next couple days. If we learn something in the troubleshooting that points to a root cause and we can fix it, or we get the systems back and they're stable, that's one condition that the shuttle will leave. If we get towards the end and we look at the additional day, we'll try to decide if it's more advantageous for the shuttle to come home or it's better from a station standpoint. So I think the teams will continue to work that over the next several days. We've got, you know, at least about, I guess, a week on orbit planned nominally, and we'll go ahead and sort through all that. I guess 5 days until we undock, but we'll go ahead and work through all that over this time frame and see where they are. But we've not made any decisions about where we are. But again, in typical fashion, we're keeping our options open. So we did the smart thing. We didn't transfer oxygen. We're looking at, you know, powering some things down so we can keep the shuttle around longer if needed. So again, it's just how do you keep options open, don't close off paths that you don't have to decide now on, and that's what the teams are doing.
Bill Harwood, CBS, you mentioned obviously the configuration change with the addition of the 1A and 3A power channels, and I'd heard some talk about 3A, for example, and I guess Russian-American converter units and things that can put noise in the line. And I'm obviously not trying to get you to predict what the ultimate thing was, but could you give us a range of things like that that could be culprits, or things that folks are talking about?
I guess, first of all, power quality, you know, is one thing, or associated with the solar array addition. It could be EMI, you know, electromagnetic interference from, we put a cable on the outside of space station, you remember, on the EVA not too long ago to provide LAN capability. We're looking at grounding paths to see if that's anything. It also could be some software anomaly. You know, it could be actually something even in the way that we're powering the system up. You know, when the computers both went down, you're now kind of in a unique situation when you have to bring both computers up, and how you bring those up in what right order. There may be some subtleties in the software that the teams need to work out, so there could be a software problem. It could be any one of those things. And so again, methodically what we'll do is we'll take the things that we think might be highest probability first, and we'll go look at those. We'll also look at things that are pretty easy to analyze that don't take much reconfiguration. So kind of as you go through the what could have caused the failure, you look at things that have changed, things that are easy to get data on, and then you kind of methodically go through each one and rule them out until eventually you're left with the thing that's caused your problem. So that's the process the teams are going. They've got the lists, and they're orderly working with the Russians to go through things and logically work the problem. And it's going to take time. It will not be quick. I don't expect that unless we get lucky right away and find the problem, it'll be a couple days we'll probably be in this configuration.
Patrick Peterson with Florida Today. There were several fire alarms that went off. Have you been able to rule out any possibility of minor overheating damage to any of the components of the computers? And in the event that the ISS has to be evacuated or abandoned, is there any possibility of re-entering it with new computers or new technicians or new techniques or anything like that? I mean, once the crew is gone, are they gone for good?
Okay. Well, first of all, on the fire alarms, we're seeing a direct correlation between when the computers come down and come up with the fire alarm. So we're pretty sure in fact we're sure that that's a false annunciation associated with the computer software. So there's not a physical problem that's causing those fire alarms to go off. It's a phenomenon of the software thing. And that's a clue that we'll go look at and how the software is operating to see if that gives us any indication of where we are. We're still a long way away from where we would be to demand space station. But I mean, we've got, and we're getting more creative as we go. We're figuring out other ways to operate station that will keep us manned for an extended period of time. So I think we're a long way from that scenario, but if we got there, we would leave station in a configuration where we could come back to it if we had to. But I think we're not near where we have to go demand space station.
Tarek?
Thank you. Tarek Malk with Space.com and Space News. You mentioned that it will take some time and that you've got a couple of days to look at this. What is, I guess, that cutoff day about when you have to make that decision for an extension? I mean, is it up until you decide to go on dock or what? Yeah, that's probably a better question that you might raise when the
the MMT guys come in at the later press conference, and you can ask them about that overall timing. But you know, from my perspective, we've got multiple days to go work this thing, and they'll tell you when exactly the decision point has to be. But there's a lot of flexibility in that timing.
Okay, I understand we have a reporter standing by at NASA headquarters. Please go ahead with your question.
Tracy Watson, USA Today. We heard on the loops earlier today that there's a rising CO2 level, and I assume that's both shuttle and station. And if you could talk about why that is and the impact, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I didn't hear that call, but when we had the power configuration to the Russian segment was such that we couldn't provide them power from U.S. systems very well. So I think probably the CO2 scrubber was down on the Russian side. It's now back up again, I would assume. I don't know for a fact, but the power is available to start it back up if it's the right time. A lot of the Russian systems can operate in two modes. They can operate in a computer-controlled mode, and they can operate in a manual mode. We can bring those systems up in the manual mode to do that. We also have the carbon dioxide removal system on the U.S. side in the U.S. laboratory. We can use that also to remove CO2 from the overall station if we need to do that. And again, I don't know if we've brought that device on or not, but if the levels get to where they need to be, we've got multiple options to remove the CO2. And probably the preferred one would be to use the U.S. systems in the U.S. lab.
Okay, I understand we have a reporter at Kennedy Space Center now with a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, this is Dan Billow, WESH-TV. You touched on this, but I want to ask you to I guess, elaborate on it. There has been talk of, the extreme possibility of abandoning the space station. Can you say, does this problem raise that possibility at all? Is there any chance of that? And could you also talk a little bit about which systems are you concerned about most? Carbon dioxide, navigation, attitude control? Thanks.
Okay. I would say that there's an extremely remote chance that this problem would lead to abandoning the space station. I think in terms of criticality of problems, we can do CO2 removal from the U.S. lab, and that'll be fine. I think that the concern is really attitude control, and can we find ways of providing attitude control without using these computers? Can we use the control moment gyros to provide the attitude control, and then maybe use the progress vehicles to desaturate those control moment gyros when they get saturated? Could we use maybe even Russian ground commands through the computer systems to desaturate the control moment gyros? Those things will be able to provide us with sufficient attitude control. I don't know the details of how we're going to do that yet, but I'm pretty convinced that the teams will figure out a way to go ahead and do that and provide that. So the basis of why I say it's extremely remote is I think there's enough redundancy in the overall system of using some of these other propulsion systems and our control moment gyro system to provide the attitude control, and ultimately the loss of attitude control for an extended period of time would drive us to get in the Soyuz and come home, because eventually that would result in loss of power, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I think that's very remote because we can look at other ways, not our normal ways of providing attitude control, and still be sufficient. So again, I think we've got time to work it. It's good that the shuttle is here. It can provide attitude control for us right now, so it's a very stable platform, so there's no concern. We've got plenty of time to go work this problem, and we'll figure out the right way to go do this over the next couple days, and hopefully we'll get the root cause, understand what the root cause is, remove it, and then get back to where we need to be.
Okay, back here at Johnson.
Yeah, Jason Whiteley from KHOU here in Houston. The situation seems to have stabilized. How critical would you deem it as of now?
I don't know. I mean, I think we're stable. We've got a plan to go work it. We've got a methodology to go work through it. We've got the teams set off going through it methodically to go work this. So I don't I mean, maybe it's an understatement, but I don't consider this critical. In my world, this is kind of space station operations. We got a challenge. We'll figure out a way through the team to go work this, get it understood, figure out some clever ways, some workarounds, some things I'm not even aware of yet will come up, I'm sure, in the next couple days between our Russian partners and then us, and we'll figure out a way to get this behind us. So again, the good thing is we've got time. There's no criticality in the sense that it has to be resolved in a certain period of time. We've got the advantage of the shuttle, which even gives us a more relaxed environment. We can take our time, work through it methodically, understand what the problem is, and get this behind us. And the only complex piece is that it is a complicated space station. This failure isn't easy to understand. It's some combination between the Russian systems potentially and our systems. So that takes a lot of integration time and takes a lot of work. So that the criticality is not there as much as the complexity, and it's just going to take us a little bit of time to get this worked out.
Thank you. That will conclude today's briefing. Please remember that we have a mission status briefing at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central scheduled. We'll return now to mission coverage. Thank you.